Hi, my name is John Shatat, and I'm a volunteer for the Edgar Cayce Foundation. And today, I would like to talk to you about a case from the Edgar Cayce readings. Now let's imagine it's 1943, and you're 19 years old, and for the last 3 years of your life, you have been in a sanatorium in Pennsylvania, dying of tuberculosis. You are at a very advanced stage, and there is no cure, and you're all alone. What would you do?
It was 1943 and World War II was raging, but there was also another battle at home, the fight against tuberculosis. It was ravaging America and killing more than 70,000 Americans every year. Tuberculosis is the deadliest infectious disease in human history and has killed more than any other infectious disease on Earth. In the 19th century, tuberculosis killed about a quarter of the adult population in Europe. It has killed over 1 billion people in the past 200 years alone. In the 1940s, infected patients would be sent to sanatoriums. In May 1943, a 19-year-old named George Conjar sent a letter to the Christian mystic Edgar Cayce, asking for help. He had been living in a sanatorium in Pennsylvania for 3 years and was dying of tuberculosis. He was at a very advanced state of the disease. He wrote,
"Somewhat over 3 years ago, I first entered a sanatorium for tuberculosis. It has been my habitation up until the present day. I'm 19 years of age, being admitted first at the age of 16, and in the consequence of the disease have experienced 3 breakdowns. I have been told that a sum of $20 is asked of members. You probably realize by now that I am unemployed, that I have no money. After some debate, I thought of the following, Mr. Cayce. If you gave me a reading that resulted in a cure, I'd offer you my services for 8 hours of every day for 1 year, in the practice of helping my fellow man. I do this entirely free of charge. Food or board, and any type of work assigned me would be undertaken with a glad heart. Closing in all sincerity, I am George Conjar."
Edgar Cayce received the letter and wrote him back, saying he would do the reading for free. This is something that he would often do.
"Will be glad to try and be of a service, and it will be entirely up to you whether you pay anything or not. Just hoping to be the means of a service. Sincerely, Edgar Cayce."
George would have to wait another 2 months to get his reading. His disease progressed, and he had suffered a collapsed left lung. A date was set for the reading, the 8th of July, 1943.
The way Mr. Cayce gave readings was an evolving process. If he was giving a life reading, his head would be aligned towards the north. If he was giving other types of readings, his head would be aligned to the east. But Mr. Cayce would always start the reading with a prayer. It was his attunement process, the foundation of the reading. And it corresponded to Jesus' teachings, which said, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and soul, and your neighbor as yourself." The first is attunement, the second is service. Once the prayer was completed, he would loosen his jacket and take it off. He would loosen his tie, belt, and shoelaces and take off his shoes. Mr. Cayce would then lay down, put his hands on his forehead, and he would wait until he would see a light. Once he saw the light, he would move his hands to his stomach and his eyes would begin to flicker. His wife Gertrude had about 30 seconds to give the suggestion for the reading. If she would miss his window, Mr. Cayce would have a really good nap. But next, let's take a closer look at the reading for George. Gertrude Cayce gave the following suggestion.
You will go over this body carefully, examine it thoroughly, and tell me the conditions you find at the present time, giving the cause of the existing conditions, also suggestions for help and relief of this body. You will answer the questions as I ask them.
Yes, we have the body here. As we find, while the conditions are rather serious, and it is rather advanced stage, if there will be the use of those things as may be suggested, and a consistency in the manner of the body's activity. This disturbance may not only be allayed and stayed, but the body may be capable of doing very good work and contribute to the spiritual things of life.
Mr. Cayce went on to recommend a keg with charred oak inside, filled with brandy. The charred oak was meant to purify the brandy, and George was to inhale the fumes from the brandy. The alcohol within the fumes would kill any bacteria in his lungs. Mr. Cayce also recommended a healthy diet, filled with vegetables and calcium supplements.
The reading was mailed out, and within 5 minutes of George receiving his reading, he checked out of the sanatorium against the advice of his doctors, who were sure he was going to die. George followed the reading to the letter and started to improve. He wrote to Mr. Cayce.
Thank you so much for your letter. In it, you stated that you looked forward to someday when we could speak personally. I, too, look forward to such a day, and when my health permits, with your permission, I'll come to Virginia Beach and thank you personally. It won't be an adequate thank you, since I can't even begin to put into speech such a great thanks as I feel.
Unfortunately, he never met Mr. Cayce. Mr. Cayce died on January 3, 1945, before George could meet him in person. In 1998, Paul Mazza, an Edgar Cayce Foundation volunteer, recorded an interview with George Conjar.
I was at the tuberculosis sanatorium in South Mountain, Pennsylvania. I arrived there probably in April, right after my 16th birthday of 1940. And then I was there until, I believe, July of 43. I had steadily progressed from an incipient stage of tuberculosis to a far advanced stage. I'd gotten to the point where I thought that I would be dying. As a member of the association, gave me the book to read, There's a River. And then that started my relationship with Edgar Cayce. There was no doubt in my mind when I had that reading in hand, but that I was going to live, that here was the answer to my problem. So I don't remember leaving, but I must have left like 5 minutes after the mail came. The diet was unique in that there were a lot of yellow vegetables called for. I remember my mother making me sweet potatoes or yams almost every day. I remember eating all the carrots. I remember walking myself for the raw milk that I had to take. You could buy a charred oak keg very easily back in 1943. Actually, I was like so well, so fast. And when the state clinic doctor told me that that x-ray was like absolutely perfect for, you know, what I was looking for. Well, then you're young and you're well, and so what do? Then you forget your ordeal and a lot of things you do. But I did, I tried to lead the good life that Edgar Cayce suggested. My only regret is that I never got to go back down to Virginia Beach as I wanted to do, and to meet Edgar Cayce and then talk to him, but that never occurred. I'm satisfied that Edgar Cayce was the saint in my life.
George did keep his vow to help his fellow man. Once he was cured and found a job, for 3 years, he gave 1/3 of his salary to his mom, 1/3 he would keep himself, and 1/3 he would take to the poorest parts of Harrisburg and give to the poor. This giving to the poor is something he did for the rest of his life. He lived well into his 90s. In June 2014, Sidney Kirkpatrick invited George Conjar to come to the ARE Congress, fulfilling George's wish to thank Mr. Cayce in Virginia Beach.
The one doctor there marveled when he x-rayed me. He said that though the left lung was cured by calcification, it just means that all the cavitation and if there are any germs there, it's like putting a cement over it. And so that existed. But anyway, it cut the ability of my lung to function tremendously. But I never knew it. And the reason I never knew it is because he said my left lung grew and encompassed the area where my right lung was, like above it and around it. And I never had any inability to breathe and, do the things. Thank you all very much. I really love you all. I'll never forget Edgar Cayce, and anything that this institution ever wants me to do, I'll be happy to do.
George Conjar's story of healing was not unique in the Cayce readings. In fact, there were many more. Even some of the remedies that Mr. Cayce prescribed are still being used to this day. For example, Cayce said that the charred oak keg was good for most infectious lung conditions. And the director of the Japanese Cayce Center has said that some of the COVID patients in Japan are using the charred oak keg. But as always, consult a medical doctor before trying out any new medication. George Conjar was the first Cayce reading recipient that I interviewed. After him, I wanted to interview as many as I could. If you have enjoyed this video, think about joining me at the ARE on June 18, where I'll be talking more about George and some of the other reading recipients that I've interviewed. Thanks for watching.